councilman from the 11th district. So Mike, show's yours.
Thank you. In the county right now, there are nearly 47,000 people who are homeless. Our shelter system is horrible. It's segregated by gender, so you and your wife, or your husband, depending on your gender, cannot be together in the shelter. You can only bring a backpack's worth of stuff, so all of your belongings you have to abandon here on the street. Oh, and by the way, we're throwing you out at 6 a.m. The city settled in a way that said we will allow people to sleep on the sidewalks from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. as long as they're not within 10 feet of a doorway. The idea at the time was that that would be a temporary measure until we provided the housing and the shelter. And then 10 years later, nothing. The government was responding only to chronic homelessness. The unintended consequence was that we weren't helping people who became homeless recently. And so that's one of the reasons our homeless population went up, because we were telling people, you're not homeless enough, be homeless longer before we'll help you. And that was absolutely crazy. We've got to get the full pipeline from A to Z. For too long, we've had permanent supportive housing and emergency shelter. And those two things are so far apart. They need to be a continuum of how do you get from a week in an emergency shelter to transitional or temporary housing while we find you a unit more permanently. It's important to remind people about the humanity of it. 30% of the people who are homeless in Los Angeles are women, or that huge numbers of people who are homeless in Los Angeles are runaway youth, or are veterans, or are people who have personal stories. They had a stroke and they lost their job, and then they lost their house. The biggest things that stands in the way is apathy and cynicism. For the first time that I can remember, things are starting to change significantly. The city and the county got together and they actually developed a comprehensive strategy. How do we respond to this problem? Part of what the city is trying to do to fix its stuff is to say we need to build more housing for people who are homeless. Not shelters, housing. We're working to build the permanent housing, which is the long-term permanent solution. It's expensive and it takes a while to do, but it's got a 93% success rate. It comes with wraparound services, counseling, job training, medical services, mental health when needed, for the chronically homeless. Then, for someone who recently became homeless, we're doing something called rapid rehousing. It's a program where we basically give someone 3 to 6 months of a short-term rental subsidy, maybe some minimum job counseling or something like that, or job placement, and then they're back on their feet. The courts have said, until we provide the alternative, people get to live on the streets. So regardless of where you come from, the response has to be to provide the housing and provide the services, or we're never going to get out of the problem, and we're never going to be able to end it, whether you believe it's a humanitarian problem or it's a question of neighborhood blight. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.